Good, hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening for some of you, and welcome to this session on driving private sector engagement in sustainable agriculture. So maybe we can start slowly, since there may be some other participants joining. My name is Greta Ellero. I work for the UNDP Food Systems team. And today with me, there is Christina Archer. Christina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Greta. Great to be with you all today, this morning, afternoon. My name is Christina Archer, as Greta said, and I've been supporting the UNDP team with private sector engagements for the last 8 years or so. Thank you, Greta.
Thank you, Christina, and also thank you to our food systems, the FEX community, colleagues, Alexandra, Atalla, and Alejandra. Thank you so much for providing this space for hosting this session on private sector. So let me just give you a brief introduction to the session before handing over to Christina. This session is part of a journey we have been having on different topics under the Food Systems, Land Use and Restoration, FOLUR Impact Program. It's a global program implemented in 27 countries by the World Bank, together with partners, including UNDP, and funded by the Global Environmental Facility. So the FOLUR program works to transform food and land use systems by promoting sustainable agriculture production. So we are having these 60-minute workshops to basically support, explore how FOLUR country projects, but also support other practitioners, can strengthen private sector engagement to support sustainable agriculture and landscape transformation. So my colleague Christina will provide a great overview of some practical tools and approaches that you can use to strengthen the engagement of the private sector in your projects, in your work. We will have the chance to also listen to the experience of one country, Ethiopia, who has put in practice these tools. And so, yes, we will also showcase examples of effective collaboration with the private sector. So with that, let me hand over to Christina. Christina, over to you.
Thank you, Greta. Good to see you all on the call today. We have a short session today, so I'm going to dive straight in and hope that you can all see my screen. Greta, is it okay?
Yes.
Yep. Great. So all of you, and we know, especially for those working with the FOLUR programs, engaging private sector has been a key part of your programs. They are, of course, one of the main stakeholder groups you have to engage. And for many of the commodities that you have been working on, a private sector is a key part of enabling, of facilitating, of making those value chains happen. So you need to work with them. We also know that many of you already have identified and are working with the private sector. So today's session is not to tell you how to do it, because you are already doing it. It is to offer some tools of how to deepen that engagement you have, how to think of it in a more strategic way in order to maximize the impact and have more effective collaboration with private sector actors. So please feel free throughout today's call. It is, as I said, very short, so we're just introducing some tools to you, but feel free to put questions in the chat and also share your experience. If you've worked with certain sectors, certain companies, certain finance institutions using an approach you think's been really successful, then please do share that with us. So I'm just going to take some time to go through a few of the tools that you can use, that we will share with you after the call, and Mulugeta will share how they approached it in Ethiopia with the coffee sector. So as you know, in any work where you are bringing stakeholders together in a platform, in a collaboration space within your program, there are going to be a range of stakeholders. UNDP, and I'm sure many others, broadly classify them as the different governmental partners you're working with, different civil society groups that you bring in, development partners, and the private sector. So that is who we're focusing on today. A lot of the tools we'll go through you can use for any stakeholders, but today we want to really focus and think about how you deepen your engagement with the private sector. As I mentioned, a lot of the material is available from UNDP's Effective Collaboration for Action Guide and Toolkit, with some specific private sector related sheets and information documents that we will share after the call. Very broadly, and again, the slides will be shared, so you don't need to take notes of everything, but very broadly, we follow these. We suggest that you look at these steps for thinking about your private sector strategy, either to develop one if you don't already have one, but we're assuming many of you do, as FOLUR has been going for some time. So where are you now? Take a moment with your time, with your partners, with your team, to just review, where are we? What are we trying to do with our FOLUR or our program? What are our objectives? What is a change that we want to see? With who? So just regroup, where are we now and what do we need to do? It's also a good time to, again, very quickly with your team and partners, do a quick SWOT analysis. I'll show you that in a minute. Just to reaffirm what you've been doing well, what could be improved on. And then what we're going to focus on today is really taking a bit more time to think more strategically and systemically about your universe of private sector actors, beyond the known names, beyond the ones that come to mind first, beyond the ones you have already worked with. Who else do you need to identify and work with? But of course, they're going to be hundreds. Many private sector actors are in the landscapes that you're working or have an influence on them. You can't work with all of them. So how do we prioritize? Who do you need to really deeply engage with? And we'll share some tools to do that. For UNDP, and maybe for some of your organizations as well, there is a process of risk screening for various reasons. So you might have a process for that. Reviewing again all of this information you have to really then start developing your engagement plan. And we'll go into a little bit more depth with that as well. So how are you engaging with the priority actors you've identified? And this is a constant loop, very standard. I'm sure many of you know this already, but it's just a good moment to refresh our memories about the cycle that we'd like to suggest you deploy. So as we said, you've taken time, you've reviewed your objectives. Where are you now in terms of achieving those? Where do you need to get to by the end of your program? What is the impact and change you're trying to have? Specifically for the private sector and the work you and your team and your partners are doing, take some time to just review. What have we been doing well? What do we feel has really, really succeeded? What do we see is something the private sector is looking to us for? So it's a win-win for us and them. What expertise are we bringing that is of value to the private sector? So what are your strengths? Note them down and keep reviewing those. That's what you can build on. There's also many opportunities that might be coming up. There's a platform that you can work with as an entry point to a bigger group for private sector engagement? What are external trends that might actually be working to our advantage? For example, the EU deforestation rules are giving an incentive to many companies to join some of the work that's happening around deforestation-free commodities. Which of our partners already have a really good relationship with private sector, so we can build on that and support them? We're not starting from scratch. And where do we see goals that the private sector can't achieve? These are just examples of the kind of questions you can ask yourselves around your current work and your team's capacity to work on private sector. Of course, we also have some weaknesses to identify. What hasn't gone so well? Where are we not seen as an organization? Are we not seen as having an advantage compared to other organizations who are known to be strong and working closely with the private sector? And what threats do we have? So a quick exercise, but really good one to review how you're getting on. The key steps that we're going to look at today are around this identifying who you need to be focusing your efforts on. And the first step is mapping your universe of who are your private sector stakeholders. Very often I've worked with teams who, the first thought is we're working in coffee, so we have to work with Nestle. Yes, that's a good private sector to think about. They're very big in the coffee world. Of course they are, but it is the first thing that came to mind. Let's take a moment to reflect more broadly and more systemically. Think of connections, think of private sector actors beyond the ones that we immediately think of, who might be really influential and knowledgeable, who would really help and impact the work that we're doing. So it is a moment to, and even if you've started your program, it's a good moment to just pause and reflect again on understanding better who your private stakeholders are, beyond the ones you've already engaged with, to really review again who is doing what, who in our sector, in the commodity space we're working in, who is influential and knowledgeable beyond the names that we know, what is motivating them to do what they do. Your team and colleagues will have a lot of information about this. There's now increasing information available online that could be researched. And then with other partners and stakeholders you have externally, do some interviews, see what they think about who would be good private sector actors to be involved. So again, the key message here is think beyond the traditional with a more systemic view. We do have a tool that we'll share with you after, a very basic Excel sheet, which I'll show you some examples of in a minute, but just helps to systematically note down all of the actors and keep adding to them. Usually we find that you could come up with a list of, say, one, maybe 200, 300 for especially national level platforms. I know in Ethiopia with Mulugeta, we came up with, I think, over 120 different actors just for the coffee sector. So it is going to be a long list and one that you can keep adding to. It's like a mapping of who is in your universe. And this is the important thing. Very often we talk about private sector and then we say companies. So the two words are interchangeable, whereas for UNDP, at least, private sector is actually a much broader definition, which goes all the way from smallholders and smallholder groups, because in a way they are a business in themselves, through to aggregators, small traders, small enterprises, national exporters, input providers and traders, all the way to finance sector and even some socially state-owned enterprises. So also take a moment to think in your landscape and where you're working, who would be private sector actors for you? So usually we think of the big multinationals and even large domestic companies, but who else is influential and really consuming or buying or inputting or influencing the landscape and the commodity you're working on. Don't forget business associations, because also a really good way of accessing a bigger range of private sector actors. So these are, again, just examples, and in the materials we'll share, again, there's a list that for UNDP we found helpful of who are private sector actors, but you can add depending on your context. So take that time to think, who is the private sector? And then, as some of you, or I hope many of you on the call have also participated in some of our sessions led by colleagues on effective collaboration for action, and reminding us that we are working in a very complex food system. I love the diagram on the right. It takes a long time to look at it. There's a lot going on, but as a snapshot, it captures exactly that. There is a lot going on. A lot of factors impact on the work you are trying to do. So again, let's take that approach ourselves in thinking about the private sector. Let's think more broadly, not linearly, and away from the known names. Let's look at that system and see who are the private sector actors in our system. This is a very basic but slightly expanded look that the Peru colleagues did for their palm sector. So looking beyond the value chain, or the supply chain actually in this case, of the traders to mills to processors, and trying to see around that, what are the factors and processes impacting on the palm oil sector in Peru. For each of these boxes on the bottom and a little bit on the top as well, what are the private sector actors who are involved in extension services, providing inputs, providing finance, which we know is key from smallholders all the way up any supply or value chain. So really help them think more broadly about who are the private sector actors we need to work with, and identifying really big gaps of where there was a lot of organizations they were not active or engaged with that they really should be. So do something similar for the commodities you're working with and see who else comes to mind. You don't need to look in the detail of this, but the Excel sheets that we'll share with you will help you to, again, think about the categories, as we just said. So multinational companies, big companies, SMEs, business associations. Who else do you think are important private sector categories in your landscapes? Are you working with them or not? Maybe you identify new ones. And just think again, should we continue working with them or not? Are they still going to be a priority? Let's do a first scan, and then start noting down who some of those organizations might be. So again, don't look at the detail. It's just to show you how again, the Peru team really started to note down different companies or finance institutions or cooperatives, associations, against all of the categories they've found, and making notes. Very good mapping that they did. It's the same thing really. So that's the first step. Who is our long list of stakeholders? Who's our universe? Jot them down in the Excel sheet. Keep adding to that as things change. But we can't work with all of them. You will all have some resource constraints, either a small team, maybe the budget. So it is not going to be that easy to work with 200 or 300 private sector actors across that range of categories. So we need to prioritize. How do we do that? Many of you, again, this is a very standard tool that you will have maybe seen in your advocacy, if you're doing advocacy plans or other stakeholder mapping. It's not new, but it's really helpful, again, to use it specifically thinking about your private sector actors from that long list that you have. Again, really nice to do in a team. And, you know, we did that in Ethiopia with Mulugeta and his team as well. To even get the dialogue going between different partners and different team members is in itself a great process. the actors we identified, the finance institutions, the cooperatives, the multinational traders, how influential are they for our particular program, the impact we're trying to achieve, the objectives that we have? Do they have a high influence? Are they very important? Are they very resourceful? Are they very respected? Or not? And also, how interested are they in the changes in the impact that we're trying to bring about? Are they motivated? Would they be willing to engage, or are they hostile and skeptical? So that helps you just sort of just categorize them in a way that can really surface who would be a champion. There's not going to be many of them, really high influence with really high interest, but you need to identify them because they can really unlock and bring others with them. Who are those who are quite influential and they're sort of interested, but yeah, I'm not sure yet. So they're sort of reluctant, is what we'd call them. How can you motivate them to become those champions that you need to really drive the impact we're looking for? And there's, maybe those who are supportive, so they're really interested, but they've got low influence. So how do you build their capacity to be more, to be a champion? And then many will have they're sort of interested, but not really a lot of influence. Most of your stakeholders will be in this group. So you don't discount them. You have to keep them informed. You have to identify these marginal stakeholders, but you maybe will not dedicate as much effort and time and resource to them. And then most importantly, or as important, if not, are identifying those who have a very high influence, but have a negative aspect to what you're trying to do, and who you could call being unsupportive because they could derail what you are doing. So this helps to then think about your strategy. You are not going to be working in the same way with every private sector actor. You don't only invite them to a platform meeting once a month. You have to really think about, how do I work with an organization that's reluctant compared to one that's marginal? And that will be very different ways of engaging. So really starting to prioritize and pick some actors you need to really dedicate time to, because they are a champion, because they are unsupportive, really helps you with that development of a very specific strategy for that actor. All of this is in the private sector guidance that UNDP developed a few years ago, which you will get after the call. So again, there's a lot more detail in that that you can look at with your teams. So again, the main point is to identify what each of the private sector actors that you need to work with, what are they? Are they a champion? Are they reluctant? Are they unsupportive, marginal, etc.? And that will determine how you could work with them and your strategy. I know I'm talking quite a lot, so I will give you a little space for some questions and reflections in a minute. Again, I don't want to look at because it's been recorded, I'm not going to pause on that for a long time, but that snapshot was to show you that the Peru team again used that table to map out all of their actors. So it can be quite busy. You'll have only a few champions, a lot of marginals, and 2 or 3 in the other boxes. So we've got our big universe, we've identified our long list, we've started a process of prioritizing them by picking out some of the ones we know we need to focus on, depending on our team, our resources, the time that we have. How do we do this now? So this is where, again, taking time to develop an engagement plan for your priority stakeholders will be really important. I know everybody's busy and there's always a lot of things to do, but just taking a few hours or half a day to just take some time to think through and do some research around that finance institution that's a champion, or that trader that's a reluctant. Let me do a little bit more research in them. What is their current vision? What are their targets on deforestation-free commodities or land use and restoration? Is there something there that we can work with? Do they have sustainability commitments and policies that you can show your work is going to help them to achieve, or in turn, their work on that sustainability issue can be fed into your platform or collaboration space as well? Who are they working with? What programs do they have? Really doing a bit of research, not assuming or not making assumptions, rather, about what they are interested in, but really doing a bit more research there. And then the way of engaging is also, there's a lot more detail again in the information we will share later. Engaging with the private sector isn't just inviting them to your meetings. In a review that we did last year for the one of UNDP's programs in Peru and Indonesia with the palm, coffee and cocoa sectors, we heard very clearly from many companies that they are a bit tired of just being invited to another meeting with no action. They were not asked to contribute. They feel they have knowledge to share. They have experiences they want to share with others and learn from them. So engaging isn't just inviting them to a meeting, it's thinking carefully about how to really involve them in a way that will benefit the work you're doing and obviously have an incentive for them, be seen of interest. So think about, for each of your priorities and the long list, if you have time, what could be the scope of engagement? What do you want them to participate in which way? What are those entry points, their areas of interest that you've identified in your research? And there's also many types of engagement. For many of the marginals, for example, you will just keep them informed, and information and communication is really important. Make time to just craft a newsletter once a quarter. Keep everybody informed of what's going on. And that is just one way of communication. That's the absolute minimum. You can then build on that. With some, you'll consult. So you'll ask for their information, but ultimately somebody else is deciding. We move up that ladder of engagement to get them more deeply involved, to actually collaborate with them, all the way to, where possible, with some of your really strategic private sector partners, co-creating shared vision, shared power, shared decision making. So with all of your private sector partners, you will not necessarily work in the same way. You don't need to engage with all of them in the same way. So really think that through as well. This again will be shared, really very basic, but can be helpful to take some time for each of the priority actors you've identified to just do that, put that research down on paper. What are their objectives? Who do we think they are in terms of our stakeholder archetypes? And what am I going to do to engage with them, given the different types of engagement we've just found? So having maybe 10 or 15 of these mini engagement plans, we know some teams have found quite helpful. So I'm just going to pause here just to leave the floor open to maybe any quick questions, reflections, and I'd love to hear if anybody's actually used any of these tools and how did you find them. So yeah, many of you don't have your video on, so I'm hoping you're still with us and you've been able to see the slides as they've come. But yeah, would anybody like to share any thoughts? No, that's good. Well, it's not good that you're not sharing thoughts, but any questions? You're following without the video, thank you. Maria Diaz, over to you.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes, very well. Nice to see you.
And nice to see you. Well, nice to meet you. Thank you so much
Yes.
for this presentation. It's quite interesting because, so for those of you who don't know me, so I'm at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. We're an international NGO, and we lead the FABLE Consortium, which is a global research network. We develop, basically, we use modeling tools to produce integrated pathways for food and land use system transformation. Our product is mostly targeted to governments. We involve or try to involve stakeholders for the design of the scenarios because we believe that's the only way to build a joint vision for the sustainable transformation. And it has been difficult to engage the private sector, mostly because we don't see a role for them beyond giving feedback on the scenarios, but even so, it seems little interest to them. So my question is, have you been in a situation where you are developing a product, an analysis, a report where your main audience is not the private sector? Yeah, how do you find or build an angle that can be attractive to them? Or yeah, I just want to hear other experiences in that facing that specific challenge.
I thank you for that really good question. I'll be interested to hear if others are facing the same. We do have, I should have had a slide on it, but we'll send the link. There's a very big piece of work that UNDP and its partners in the Good Growth Partnership did called Value Beyond Value Chains, that has a range of case studies there and tools, a big sort of a suite of slides that you can also use and adapt for your case to show many different actors why you could work with the private sector. So not asking the private sector to work with you, but getting government, for example, to see why it is helpful to engage in different ways with the private sector. We know some governments or some agencies are nervous about working with companies for various reasons. There's trust issues, power imbalances, and so on. But as we've said, the private sector is much broader than just the big names or the big traders that we might think of. And ultimately, for any commodity, private sector is involved, whether it's input providers or the credit providers for smallholders, the transport agencies that move things around. And they are the functioning system. So at least understanding them is an absolute basic step. So that sort of stakeholder mapping is an important step to know. And you may think at the end of that, actually, they're all marginal, but at least we know now and we keep people informed. Quite a lot of the material that we've shared, you could use with your partners to get them to, so the partner in this case could be government. And also, as we said in the value beyond value chains examples, again, why should government agencies or could government agencies work with this wide range of private sector actors at a landscape level or at a national level, and so on. So they're not always common partners, but I think part of our role is helping each side kind of see why, for good collaboration, we need to understand each other and find ways of working more effectively, because we are all key actors in this. A very long answer. I'm not sure that did that answer your question, Maria?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And Taufik, did you have is it a question for the presentation or a response to Maria and the work and the question that she had?
It's another question, actually. I wanted to press the raise hand later, but somehow by mistake it already pressed. But please finish with this Maria's question first, then I'll come later for a different question.
I think is there anybody that would like to share any experience based on what Maria said? No, Taufik, should we go to you?
Thank you. Let me try to open my camera if that works. Yeah, I'm Taufik Alimi. I work for Proforest, and somehow my camera doesn't work. Anyway, no, it works. Okay, thank you. Profres work with companies because we are a mission-driven organization, but we are in a way operating like consultant. We have companies to meet the ambition to become more responsible, especially in the responsible sourcing. If we are working with downstream company throughout their supply chain to the origin of suppliers, we also work with the suppliers to have the responsible production, where being responsible means they are complying with the regulation and also aspire to implement whatever is required by different type of sustainability requirement, whether it is certification, assurance system, and so on and so forth. My question is really, of course, when we work with companies, usually they are the champion or supportive to ideas of having sustainable or responsible sourcing and production. Either it is within their own supply chain or goes beyond it and go into landscape or other type of collaboration. However, I witness and we feel in our company that currently, especially since I think last 2 years, companies are somehow feeling or thinking that they are becoming more limiting in terms of their ambitions. They are less ambitious in meeting very big goals on sustainability or responsibility. They are more driven by compliance system only. So being compliant to whatever, maybe for forest related product, they are looking at UTR, for instance. And they go for UTR and very hard to bring them up beyond that, you know. So on other commodities, they may also be looking at the importing countries regulation or producing countries regulation and just be at that level rather than going up for different. So yes, they are supportive, but the ambition is kind of declining. I wonder, in those maps that you have, you know, they are still within one box, but the continuum is somewhat toward the lower rather than to the more. What would be the strategies that others have had in their past experience in building up the ambitions of companies, you know, of private sectors to move up to go beyond compliance, for instance. Of course, compliance is important, but I think if we really want to make this world a better place to live, I think we need to start embracing and asking everybody to start moving up beyond just compliance level. So again, my question is very simple. How do we bring the ambition of companies forward and meeting a larger ambition? Thank you.
Thank you, David. Great question. I think we could have a session just on that. I think just some quick responses from me. Again, in the value beyond value chains material we'll share, that's exactly the point that we feel we should all be working towards. Getting away islands of excellence with some of those leaders and champions that you mentioned, and raising the playing field, raising the quality, raising sustainable production across the landscape, across the country. And so, you know, why is it in our interest to do that? What are the incentives of companies to continue investing? I work a lot in the coffee and cocoa space. And I know, as you say, at the moment, sustainability is not as much in the forefront as it was before because of the compliance costs involved, because of the uncertainties around key markets and their regulations. But the incentive there has proved to be efficiency. So how do we think about presenting the work we're doing or the impacts that we want to have in a way that resonates more with, in this case, companies such as traders? By investing in my own system for compliance, it's really expensive and takes a long time. Doing it through a collaboration space such as a platform is more efficient, reduces my costs, and actually gives me some sort of, in a good way, kind of, if you like, protection. So it's trying to find those entry points to help companies, in this case, companies and other private sector actors, get involved in your effort and your collaboration space. For individual companies and their sustainability programs, again, how do we frame it in a way that we know will resonate? Security of supply in the face of increasing climate change impacts, social movements, youth moving away from agriculture, etc. That is impacting your security of supply. So how can you sort of show how sustainability efforts will support those? So it's finding those hooks, and I know ProForest does that already. You know, follow your work very closely, and some really good incentives, but some really good examples of work. But we're seeing, especially in the last year or two, because of the geopolitical situations, because of regulation that is taking air away and interest away from the broader sustainability discussions, but then they haven't gone away. So it's kind of continuing to map those trends and show how, yeah, but by investing in sustainability and in collaboration, especially, it can help meet some of those targets. But just before I hand over to Mulugeta, I'll just give the space if somebody else would like to share a reflection to Tawfiq and his question. Great question, I love that. If you are nervous about speaking, then please do put some thoughts in the chat. Thank you for those. I've seen a few comments already. But it was a really good point, and I think one that many of you will be facing. So this apparent reducing interest in investing in sustainability. So how have you found that you can work with companies and other private sector actors? Please put any thoughts in the chat. But I'm really keen, Mulugeta, to get your input here. So as Greta said, we're delighted to have with us today the program manager for the FOLUR Ethiopia, well, for the FOLUR Ethiopia program, Mulugeta, who will just say some reflections about how they implemented some of the tools we shared and the process on working with the private sector. Mulugeta, over to you.
Thank you very much, Christina, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to talk to and to be part of this discussion, and particularly with Asian colleagues in remote settings. My name is Mulugeta Worko. I work for the Ministry of Planning and Development in Ethiopia as a FOLUR Ethiopia project manager. And that said about me, and I think FOLUR as a global program is already introduced at the onset by Greta, and thank you for that. So I don't want to take much of your time about talking of the FOLUR program. However, I would like to spend 1 minute about the intervention components, first of all, and like to share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you, Mulugeta.
Thank you.
Maybe put it into presentation mode if you could, that might be easier.
Yes. Okay.
Great.
Okay. Is that visible now?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, yes.
Great. So in Ethiopia, the FOLUR is called Preventing Forest Loss, Promoting Restoration and Integrating Sustainability in Ethiopia's Coffee Value Chains and Food Systems. A very long title. Sorry for that. And is part of the global program. I don't want to talk about it, and I don't want to talk about the problems as well, because most of you know it very well. And we implement in 22 districts in big 4 regions that's known to be coffee producing regions of Ethiopia, and known for moist Afro-montane forest ecosystems. In that said, I would like to spend 1 minute about the components. These are the areas where we are working: integrated land use planning and management systems. We also promote sustainable food production with a focus on coffee value chain. And we integrate both conservation and restoration of natural forest ecosystems through participatory forest management approach, particularly for the conservation part. And we have a cross-cutting function, which is knowledge management and M&E. And to speak few points about what we have learned and applied from private sector engagement. Before that, I would like to thank Christina and Greta for taking the initiative to provide a very intensive training in 2 rounds, one in virtual session like this one and the other in person. And I would like to share with you about what we learned from that private sector training. In the first place, I'm sorry for the point 3. It should have been point number 1. And it is about structured and comprehensive understanding of private sector engagement. A lot has been said about private sector engagement here and there. However, we rarely understand what it exactly is and how we make sure that private sector is actually engaged and what are actually the indicators of private sector engagement and how we measure impact of that engagement as well. So I think in order to arrive at that stage at maturity, first of all, we need to understand what actually private sector engagement actually is in terms of conceptual framework and in terms of the methodological aspects as well. So that training provided us a very good foundation for the Ethiopian team to understand what private sector engagement actually refers to and what its components are. And the second lesson was about stakeholder universe, how we think in terms of the different categories of stakeholders across scales and contexts. Particularly, these stakeholders differ across geographical scales and they are varied and you cannot categorize in one box. So we need to understand how these stakeholders actually vary in a bigger geographical scale. And also, what does that mean to the Ethiopian context, for example? So they might be different in when it comes to Ethiopia, depending on their engagement, the scale of operation, I mean, level of investment that they are investing in, and then the kind of things. So it gave us a broader framework to think about that stakeholder universe so that we can identify them and categorize them and prioritize them depending on the methodology that the trainers provided us, like based on the influence, interest grade, and those kind of prioritization metrics. And another interesting point that we have taken is what does actually private sector engagement plan means as part of actually the comprehensive understanding. We really acquired very interesting insight about the key components of private sector engagement plan and the steps that we need to follow to make sure that that private sector engagement plan is robust. And when we are planning, we should not be, optimistic about achieving something very ambitious at early stage of private sector engagement. So we need to think in terms of phased approach to arrive at a mature stage. It must start from like identification or orientation, awareness, and a kind of joint engagement and those things. And crafting strategies based on what the private sector actually does, what their interests are, what their influence and those things. And so far, these are the key lessons that we have drawn from the training and what we practically done after the training. So I think it's not training per se that's important. Actually, it is important because it gave us some conceptual and methodological frameworks. However, that needs to be translated into practical action. So I would like to take a couple of minutes to speak about what we did. We have started to develop a stakeholder engagement plan in team settings. And these were after identification of stakeholders with a focus on the coffee sector actually, because we had problems. We have identified that we had problems in terms of having a good database or a good profile of the private sector is the forestry sector, and that activity is still pending, which we are looking forward to make sure that the forestry sector has a private sector engagement database or stakeholder universe. We developed for the because we have identified the different stakeholders as Christina shared to us earlier. And based on that stakeholder universe, we categorized and prioritized them, and we developed a stakeholder engagement plan. And that's one action that we did. And that engagement plan actually has sets of logically interconnected actions, one coming after the other. And the second important action that we did is practical engagement of the private sector in National Coffee Platform. Christina was talking about the continuum of private sector engagement, which is analogous to what you call a continuum of participation from passive participation to proactive participation. And in here, in the private sector engagement, we have a low-level information provision to a kind of co-creation role. Now we have engaged to the the highest two levels of engagement, like the collaboration, and the co-creation stage, I can say, because we have brought the private sector, both international and national companies, into the national stakeholder platform, not simply merely members, but now they are members of the platform's board or the steering committee, so that they are now decision makers. So one form of practical engagement is allowing the private sector to also engage in decision-making processes, which makes sense for realistic action and the other thing we did is training in quality coffee production and marketing to range of private sector stakeholders. One is we have brought both coffee exporters, processors, and producer organizations, cooperatives and unions, to a common platform and created an environment where they can communicate each other and expressing their expectations. What are the processors expected to do to maintain coffee quality? What the exporters should do and what the producers should do so that the coffee value chain works efficiently in market chain. So we have made rounds of trainings at subnational levels. And I think these are the key things that we have been doing so far. And we have lots of actions that we are now drafting, particularly in establishing or strengthening private sector actors at the community level, particularly creating women-based business groups and advancing them to be entrepreneurs, like engaging them in input supply, and medium enterprise, like, for example, small ruminant marketing, coffee nursery establishment, apiculture, and those things. And now we are, because we're supporting them and we are trying to make sure that they have a robust business plan, a market analysis, and having good enough financial resources, linking them with financial service providers, and be able to invest in medium level enterprises, although not big ones. And this is what we are practically making. And we have completed the legalization and starter capital formation as well. So these are the things that we have done so far as private sector engagement is concerned. And it's a very early stage of implementation. And I'm sure that we will advance all the things that we have done so far in the times to come. And I apologize for taking much of your time. And thank you very much. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you, Mulugeta. Great to hear the progress that you and the team have made in the last year since the workshop. Would anybody have any questions or reflections for what Mulugeta has shared about how they have implemented it? And Mulugeta, I'm just remembering in the workshop, just seeing your team do that thinking behind who are the actors that we need to engage with, and coming up with some of the smaller national actors that you mentioned, you know, are key. We should work with them. We hadn't thought of that before. That was really great. But any reflections or questions for Mulugeta? It's very comprehensive, Mulugeta. So I think anybody? Thank you also. Thank you so much for sharing that. Really nice to have a good example of how it was put in practice, and how those processes of using those tools have helped your team identify who to bring into the platform in different ways, and then moving beyond that to actual very concrete activities that I know are going to be benefiting and being an incentive for the private sector as well as for the national partners. So thank you, Mulugeta. Thank you also for putting, Repa, you've been very active in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing some great thoughts there as well. If some of you haven't had a chance to look, I'm particularly interested in the first comment you've made about companies having a lack of understanding of the value of sustainability, and private sector actors still being interested in short-term profits. I think that's what we've always struggled with in engaging companies specifically in the private sector group. So yes, that is something to be mindful of. I think I'm seeing many companies who, as I said earlier, in the discussion we're having with Tafiq, for that security of supply piece, are seeing the value of collaborating because it is more efficient to help the smallholder farmers they're engaging with be more resilient in the face of the many challenges that are coming up. But yes, I'd like to just last minute, anybody else like to jump in? Any further thoughts to share with the group?
Yeah, I would like to make a brief comment.
Sanjay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sanjay Sethi. I'm the National Technical Coordinator for Food Systems and Private Sector in Chess7 project in India. We have done 3 engagements with private sector in the last 6 months. And these were very high quality, high decibel engagements, specifically focused on the rice sector. What we realized that we need not transform the private sector to become a CSO or an NGO or a social service organization, because they are really hardwired to be thinking about their profit, whether short-term or long-term, and thinking about maximizing their own impact. So if we get into their skin, try to understand how they work, and then we can communicate to them by explaining to them that how these small baby steps can actually bring them a lot more value in terms of more stickiness with their suppliers, or more stickiness with their customers, better loyalty by their own employees, or maybe getting rewarded by investors or by the public investors at large, either in the short term or in the long term. And the fact that the entire regulation is moving in this direction, so you will be left out if you don't start preparing yourself. It will be difficult for you to prepare at a later date. So by communicating the language of profit, whether short term or long term, they really understand very well. And then they exactly do what we are doing. And there are some companies which are ahead of us on that. The biggest worry and difficulty that we always find is how to bring the various stakeholders come together, including those multilateral agencies, the government agencies, and to work together towards the same goal. Because we always keep working in the silos and we don't collaborate. If we are able to allow these actors to come and shine on your platform, they begin to collaborate. And I have seen that it is the egos which come in the way. And if we can put in those training programs, how to do the stakeholder consultations in a community of practice, probably it will be a lot better that how we can work together, for example, creating a market for the sustainable produce. It doesn't get created. We don't have enough money to create a campaign for the consumers. It is the private organization who have to create that campaign. But we have to work with them, and with the little budgets that we have, it is very, very important that we work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sanjay. Two really key points there. One is, as we've kind of been mentioning, how do you identify the incentives for private sector and companies quite specifically to engage? So, as you said, the efficiency, security of supply, they are markets driven. How do you work with that? Because that is the system we live in. And then separate to that, also that effective collaboration across stakeholders, because we do need to raise the playing field. People do need to work together. No one actor can achieve these alone. And within the FACS community, the Effective Collaboration for Action group has shared some tools there. So we can share those again after. But thank you for sharing that. I think a really nice way for us to close. Also some nice comments just coming in the chat now as well. Thank you, Amabek, for sharing your information there about the pilot with financial support measures. We know that is still a key barrier for sustainable production for many smallholders especially. So thank you for sharing that. Please share that within the FACS community groups as well. Greta, I'll hand back to you to close us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you everyone for participating in this session. We are gonna send you the slides and the resources that were presented during the session. And if you have any further question, we remain at disposal to answer them. Thanks again, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.